This video is to chronicle replacing the water pump on that '06 Range Rover full-size supercharged L322 Range Rover. I left some stuff in this video that I think is kind of interesting in that you never quite know what you're going to encounter when you take on a project like this. As usual, I'm really just including video that if I were looking at how to do this or lessons learned, pieces of video that I would want to see. So that's kind of what I've included. So very briefly here, before starting the project of doing the water pump, I have in advance here removed the air box. That is super simple to pull out, and the plenum or the connector to the air intake there is being removed as well. Give me a little bit of clearance. I have drained about 1 gallon of coolant out of the system right under here. At the bottom is a little orange petcock that you can use to drain out the coolant. I haven't shown the removal of the engine cover or the air intake for the HVAC system because that's super simple, and I'm sure if you're looking at this video you already know how to do that. What the next steps here are going to be are removing the fan clutch and this cluster fan shroud that goes around it, which is not super easy to do. The Land Rover manual suggests evacuating your AC and removing this pipe to get it out the way, but it's actually possible to extricate this shroud and the fan as one piece without disturbing this AC pipe too much. Probably the most fiddly part of this is getting the T25 torque screws that hold this top part of the shroud in. You only have to remove the top part. There's one here. Let me use a little bit of a pointer here. One here. There are two little connector pieces here. They're little push pin pull things. Some people suggest replacing them with zip ties because they are kind of annoying. There's a T25 torque screw right here, which is not easy to get at, but I remove it from the underneath, so that makes things a little bit easier. There's one right here at the top of the transmission cooler that also needs to come out. There are some pipes and things underneath the vehicle here that need to be disconnected before removing the fan shroud. Like I say, as I remember, it's actually the whole fan shroud comes out. It's just it leaves, not all of it is attached. So it's a little bit counterintuitive how that kind of works. But I'll show you that as I get it out. You don't have to remove all of this stuff to get it free. Just a little bit of a view underneath here. See the bottom of the fan shroud. There's a little detent here to hold the sections of the fan shroud in line with the bottom. These pipes here clip out. Easier said than done. Holding a camera. But essentially these pipes here will hang you up as you try and pull it out from the top. So trying to get everything out of the way before proceeding. Just wanted to show what is weird about this fan shroud, because I don't think you necessarily need to remove this cooler to get it out of here, because it separates. And when I move it a little bit, you can kind of tell that this bottom piece of the shroud stays in, or you can. I mean, you might be able to pull out the whole thing, but I don't think it's necessary. It's again this connector down here that I pointed out earlier above one of the coolers that you just need to get the screw out of. Once the bolt and the fan is undone, the whole thing should come out as a unit. Again, it's a little bit tricky to get it out from underneath this pipe. Before I jump into the next step, I just want to show you the tools that, if you're going to be a long-term Range Rover, Land Rover owner, you're probably going to have to invest in these. This tool here is, I got it from Atlantic British, and it is to hold the water pump bolts, nuts. It's essentially to hold the belted pulleys tight while you undo the nut on the back of the fan, which I'll show you in a minute. But before that, I'll just talk a little bit on the tools. Initially, the first time I did this, and actually maybe the second time too, I had purchased this 36mm open-ended wrench on Amazon or something for a few bucks, and it failed miserably. And because the nut gets pretty tight. I mean, you're essentially tightening it in the direction of rotation, so it naturally tightens itself, so it gets pretty tight. And I ended up having to go to O'Reilly's, and which anyone can do, and their fan clutch removal kit does have a 36mm option. A nice strong tool. But I just thought it's interesting. I ended up breaking down and buying the heavier duty SP tools 36mm wrench, and kind of look at just the machining is really questionable. I mean, this top wrench is probably more like 38mm after kind of one use. And even though they're approximately the same thickness, this is obviously a much higher quality tool. So point being, your mileage may vary, and depending on how long you're going to keep the car, it might be good to invest in one of these. If not, you can definitely get it in the O'Reilly kit. And I think they have something to hold the water pump steady too. Just a quick view of looking at the stay tool and the wrench in place. And I will tell you right now, I just put all my weight on this while I was holding this, and I can't budge it. And I had assembled this previously, and I am not an over tightener. I'm a firm believer in torque specs. This one is a little bit difficult to judge, but like I said, it kind of self-tightens itself. So not using good tools or trying to hit it with a air chisel or something like that is, I think, potentially going to lead to tears. So just FYI. Oh, another thing that's kind of cool about this tool is it has a square in the back. So what I ended up doing was using an handy torque wrench while I was holding it, to give me that little bit of extra oomph. And that was enough to get the thing loose. So, I guess in theory, no, never mind. I was just trying to kind of imagine, you know, send me a comment. How do you accurately torque it? I guess what you could do is some math to sort of figure out how long this is, what the reduction in torque would be here. I'll look into that. Quick note, once this is loose, which it is, you can remove the fan by rotating it, kind of. But it's enough, there's enough resistance there, I guess, in the clutch and whatever to undo the nut. So this is what things look like with the shroud and the fan removed. One change I did make was to set the coolant reservoir to one side. It gives a little bit more access. Your mileage may vary, and actually removing this hose here will give you a little bit more kind of leeway to maneuver the shroud. It's kind of impossible to show how it comes out. Again, note that this piece of the shroud doesn't have to come out in order to do this job. Next step is to remove the cooling fan serpentine belt, which drives, I don't know, the water pump. As is often the case with these kind of projects, I have some concern about where my leak is actually coming from. I diagnosed water pump or water pump gasket because the coolant is essentially running down the front of the engine and accumulating a little bit around the oil filter housing. But the car's been sitting for a while, so I'm not absolutely sure that's my problem. So I am going to use the Harbor Freight pressure testing kit to just confirm that I don't have some other issue. So I've pressurized the cooling system. I actually put some coolant back in to do so, and it's holding pressure and not leaking from anywhere. So either I've got something that's seeping when the engine's hot, or the water pump is leaking a little bit when running. I am seeing a little bit of a stain in the direction of the oil filter, so I'm going to proactively swap out the water pump just because I'm in here now. I don't know if you can see here, but the gasket for the water pump is clearly not a Land Rover gasket, and I've read that aftermarket gaskets, mileage may vary on them. So this has been done before. The other kind of possible and slightly worrying thing is that one of these bolts here has been stripped. I guess a kind of common issue. So I am seeing a little tiny bit of potential seepage from the gasket, so I'm going to go with that. By the way, on this rig I've changed pretty much all of the hoses, so that was one of the first things I did when I got this at 105,000 miles or whatever, and all the hoses look terrible. Okay, after leaving the system pressurized for 10 or 15 minutes, I can definitely see a very slight trickle or dampness under the water pump. So there you have it. Looks like the water pump gasket is the problem, which is kind of a drag. Probably a perfectly useful water pump. Obviously at this point I'm gonna stick in a new one and see how we go from there. So this really irritates me. I mean, this is, you know, originally a close to $100,000 car. I didn't pay anywhere near that much money for it. But literally every issue I've had with this vehicle has to do with previous owners doing less than, you know, either ignoring maintenance entirely, like not replacing hoses, or where repairs were done, they're just so lame. So I just slopped a whole bunch of RTV. I think there's no directive in the Land Rover manuals about using RTV on the water pump install, but as you can see, they just did a really sloppy job. I mean, a lot of that must have gone into the cooling system. Not sure how well. I'm going to go in a quick look. The water pump itself is sitting here, and again you can see just a ton of RTV, this weird gasket. I actually beginning to wonder if somebody made this gasket. It looks like a cardboard gasket. I mean, again, but what a POS. You can see here where the gas, you know, whatever this gasket is, has deteriorated. Like I said, I think it actually might be a piece of cereal box, which is cool and everything, but again, this is a pretty sophisticated engine. Anyway, yet again, another disappointing experience dealing with previous owners' work. So here we have just a quick look here. You can see that I've cleaned all of the old gasket material off of the engine block there. I've given a thorough clean to the 5 retaining bolts, and I'm getting the new AirTex water pump ready for install. Comes with this metal gasket. I've done some soul searching about how to go with this. Ideally, if everything was ideal, if this is a brand new vehicle, I wouldn't hesitate installing this all dry. But what I'm going to do is use a really, you know, thin layer of Coppertex on both sides of this gasket. Look, unlike this one, which is paper, this one's metal. It kind of slots in here very handily. Oops. It's got these cool little retaining tabs in the center here that presumably hold it in place while you install, which is cool. But like I said, I'm going to give it just a slight spray of Coppertex. Just, I don't think it's going to hurt. And I will probably put a tiny bit of anti-seize on these bolts. The bolts were pretty dirty and covered in corrosion and rust and stuff, so probably because the gasket was leaking. So have the both the cooling belt and the supercharger belt on. Kind of things to note here: 10 Newton meters for the water pump pulley bolts, 10 Newton meters for the I guess cooling fan pulley. I had loosened both the tensioners, this one for the accessories and this one for the supercharger and cooling fan. And the manual says 30 Newton meters of torque for this bolt that secures both of them for, you know, so you can move them. You cinch that down after you have the belts back on. These belts are almost new, so I haven't replaced them. They were new when all the hoses went in. Anyway, that's that stage of it. Next step is to wrestle with the fan shroud again. So the fan shroud is back in. I'm not gonna lie, it's really fiddly, and in fact might be a little easier if you're willing to pull this top radiator hose. I kind of agree with others who've said to do that. The only reason I didn't is this is brand new. I didn't want to mess up the O-rings, and I was able to get it back in. On this side, I would just say be really careful that you get this section I'm pointing at behind this the plastic of the existing shroud, the part of the shroud that stays in there, because it in my case it wanted to go in on the outside rather than tucking in, so that was a bit of a pain. Anyway, getting that in, the next thing you have to do, you obviously have put the fan inside here. I just removed my bubble wrap protective stuff for the radiator. Getting this started is, I'm not remembering it being that difficult, but this time it kind of was. What I ended up doing was putting my hand in from here, hopefully you can see that, and then starting this by starting the nut with my thumb, which took a bit of work. Once you get it started, you can rotate the fan like I am here to start to get the nut to engage onto the end of the shaft. I would be really careful here. It would be really tempting to get a wrench on that and cross-thread it, which would lead to tears. Anyway, that's the way that works. I think, like I said, I've seen some people have removed the coolers here and the whole right side of the shroud. I don't know if that's necessary, but it might be good to pull that radiator hose, like I said. So just tighten the bolt, and just for grins, did the math, added a torque wrench to extend my 36mm open-ended wrench, did the math to get 48 foot-pounds or 65 Newton-meters, and I'll post that formula in the video. So this again was quite the adventure, and I think a big lesson learned here is when you acquire sophisticated older vehicles, that you really have to be careful to go through them and make sure that previous owners' work has been done effectively. I think a buddy of mine once told me that one of the problems with old Jags is that they get kind of neglected, and that's, I think, certainly the case with Range Rovers too. So lesson learned there. Another lesson here is I initially diagnosed this as a leaky water pump, and I kind of questioned it when I got into the project. It turned out that was the case. It was leaking behind the gasket, it was seeping, but later on I looked at the pump itself, and there certainly was some egress from the weep hole, so it had all around kind of failed. One piece I glossed over was the replacement of the fan shroud, and I might recommend that rather than installing the fan onto the pulley first, what I might recommend is actually lining up the little Torx 25 screws the very first thing you do when you get the shroud back in. The reason for that is it's going to be, or at least it was in my case, it's pretty hard to line up particularly the Torx screw that is kind of just under the coolers. Once you get in there, you'll totally see what I mean. But really think about lining that up while you have more movement with the shroud and the fans not connected yet and stuff. So that's one thing I'm going to do differently the next time I pull that shroud. Well, it's a couple things. One would be to pull that top radiator hose to get a little more wiggle room. Two would be to line up the hole that you're going to put the Torx 25 Torx screw in before the moment you put the fan shroud into the cavity that it occupies. Other than that, and I think you saw some frustration that I had with people doing crappy work after, I mean, it's a lot of work to get the water pump. You might as well do it right once you get in there. So anyway, ran over. Hopefully people find this useful. Please get in touch if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.